I see my friends and many other hikers getting serious blisters that make their trips unpleasant or maybe even make them quit early. It made me start thinking that I've done a lot of very long trips without blisters being an issue. At first I thought, boy, am I lucky. Then I started thinking, it isn't all luck. I do a lot of things to help prevent blisters. What are they? Stay tuned and find out. I'm guessing that you may get blisters when you go backpacking. You may blame it on your shoes, or you just accept the fact that your feet are going to hurt while you're hiking. Well, before you wave that white flag and accept those blisters, or keep on going out and buying new shoes to magically solve the issues, I have 7 tips that I think will help you prevent getting blisters. Most people who run a marathon train for months before they run that race. And I'm guessing maybe you go out on some training hikes before that big backpacking trip. But the truth is, those training hikes probably aren't as far as you're going to be hiking on that backpacking trip. And maybe you haven't done quite as many as you should. And when you do those training hikes, you're probably thinking more about your muscles, your joints, your cardio, more than thinking about seasoning your feet. In normal life, your feet are kind of pampered. They're not used to that wear that you're going to be putting on them hiking day after day in a backpacking trip. Have you ever shaken hands with somebody who works with their hands, a construction worker? They are callous and tough. Years ago, I went on a mission trip to Haiti where I worked side by side with some barefooted Haitians on a construction site to build an orphanage. Those dudes' feet were amazing. Now, I'm not telling you that you need to walk around a construction site barefooted, but I am telling you that you need to get out and start those training hikes early. You need to do them frequent, and you need to make them long enough to where you are on the verge of getting blisters. And what that does is it will season your feet. Now, I go out on long walks around my town, and I go out for 2 to 4 hours, hike from 8 to 12 miles, and it's just on pavement, wearing tennis shoes, but I come back and my feet are sore, almost blistered, and it keeps them seasoned. And sometimes it isn't pleasant, but I know it's going to pay off when I go backpacking. I may be a lone wolf on this, but every time I go backpacking, I wear sock liners. And the theory behind sock liners are, when you go out backpacking, there's a lot of abrasion happening between your foot, your sock, and your shoe. And if you're wearing a sock liner, some of that friction is going to happen between the liner and the sock opposed to your foot and the sock. The key is to have very thin sock liners to keep your feet from getting warmer. I used to wear a very thin polyester sock liner, very similar to pantyhose. But then I switched over to a merino wool toe sock liner from Injinji. Now, I hate having things between my toes, and the thought of having that thing between my big toe and the next toe with flip-flops just grosses me out. But these sock liners are like gloves and are very comfortable. I started wearing toed sock liners because my little toe likes to hide under the toe next to it, and those toes rubbing together would cause some blisters. But having the material around each toe prevents those toes from rubbing together. I highly recommend these Injinji toe sock liners. They're relatively cheap and they're worth a try. Keeping your feet cool and dry may sound like mission impossible, but the key is keep your feet as cool and as dry as possible. If you haven't tried merino wool socks like Darn Tough or the toe sock liners that I mentioned from Injinji, you really should. Now, Darn Tough socks, they do cost a little bit more than normal socks, but they do have a lifetime guarantee and they're worth it. Merino wool is not like traditional wool. It's not that thick, hot, itchy, sweaty wool that you're used to. Merino wool is actually cooler, it wicks moisture better, and it dries very quickly. As far as footwear, everybody wears different shoes. It depends on the backpacker, it depends on the weather, it depends on the trail that you're going on. I personally, most of the time, like to wear trail runners because they're lightweight, they have a lot of mesh, and they dry easy and they drain very well. I like to wear ones that are not waterproof because it helps them dry quicker. Now, waterproof shoes, if they do get wet, they take forever to dry out. My feet can get sweaty, so it's very important to have that mesh to try to keep my feet cool and dry. Now, my feet don't stay dry 100% of the time on most hikes. And it's really important that if your feet do get wet, when you get to camp, as soon as you can, you need to take your shoes and your socks off and let your feet air out, dry out. Hopefully your shoes will do the same thing. In fact, if you're taking a longer lunch, I encourage you again to take your shoes off, take your socks off. That'll allow your feet to cool down and hopefully everything will get dried out a little bit. And the last tip is never, never wear the socks that you wore hiking to sleep at night. Keeping your feet clean may sound even more difficult than keeping them cool and dry when you're out on a dirty, dusty, muddy backpacking trail. Your feet are going to get dirty. And it's super important that you try to get some of that dirt off your feet because that dirt is just like sandpaper and it's super abrasive. So if you can get rid of some of that grit, you're going to get rid of some of that abrasion and you're less likely to get blisters. Always try to clean your feet when you get to camp. Go soak your feet in that cold creek. Beyond cleaning your feet, that cold water on your feet is going to feel fabulous. I know that you've heard this before, but I'm going to tell you again. If you feel a blister starting, you have a hot spot, you need to stop right away and take care of it. You aren't wasting time. You're actually going to be saving time because you're going to be able to walk faster later when you don't have a blister. Let's take that a little bit farther. Is there a place on your feet where you seem to always get blisters when you go out hiking? Well, take care of that before you start your hike. Leukotape. Leukotape is a wonderful thing. Leukotape is a bit like athletic tape, but it's better than athletic tape for doing foot care when you're out on the trail because Leukotape is much more sticky and it stays on your foot better. And if you put Leukotape on a hot spot, it'll prevent more abrasion and hopefully prevent a blister from coming to that area. Now, before you go out on your backpacking trip, if there's a place where you always get a blister, put the Leukotape on before you start your hike, and that will hopefully protect that area from developing a blister. I do this when I go out on those long training hikes because I know when I'm walking a long distance in tennis shoes on pavement, I'm prone to getting blisters in the center of my feet. Now, when I put the Leukotape on before I go for those walks, I don't have that problem. Another way that you may be able to nip the bud and prevent getting blisters is to get those Injinji toe sock liners if you have a problem getting blisters on your toes. Sometimes the big miles just get you. The cumulative sweat, dirt, and abrasion of hiking all day may cause a blister. If you're prone to blisters and your feet are telling you it's time to be done for the day, you need to listen. But if you're like me, when you're sore and when you're tired, some adrenaline kicks in and you're just like, come on, suck it up, let's go. The problem with this is when you get to camp and you have a chance to slow down, rest, that adrenaline wears off, you find out that adrenaline was shielding you from some of the pain and you're in a lot worse condition than you thought. It's hard to stop late in the day when all you want to do is get to camp. But you need to stop, assess, do some foot care if necessary, and you're going to be very thankful that you took that time later that night and the next day. Tying your shoes may sound elementary, but making sure that your foot isn't sliding around in your shoe is going to reduce abrasion and prevent blisters. I've gotten blisters on the tips of my toes when we were backpacking in Colorado. And the problem was we were coming down from a mountain and there was about 4 miles of going downhill. My shoes weren't tied tightly, and because they weren't tied tightly, my feet were sliding to the front of my shoe and the ends of my toes were hitting the front of my shoe. When you're out backpacking, your shoes may not come untied, but if they become loose from walking through a bunch of water or just walking a long ways, you need to stop every now and then and tighten those laces back up. A few years ago, I discovered that there are many different ways that you can lace up your shoes. Changing that pattern will allow you to tighten your shoes in different areas depending on your foot type. And I'm going to do a video on this coming up very shortly, and I hope that you will check that out. Thanks for watching this video. Hey, if you have any tips that I didn't cover here that may help other people who are watching this video in preventing blisters, make a comment down below and share your knowledge with everyone. But in the meantime, do me a favor, hit subscribe, punch that bell notification, check out Midwest Backpacker on Instagram and Facebook. Don't get blisters, and we'll see you out on the trail.